This is the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And Halenda's, the meat people. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland locations. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And now, here's Ted.
Hi there, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Glad you're with us. And if it's your first time listening to the podcast, thanks for taking a chance on us. And if it's not your first time, thanks for continuing to take a chance on us. And don't forget to follow us, and we'll make sure that we appear in your inbox and in your dreams and in your nightmares, whether you want it or not. You know, we got a great show today because it's all about comedy. And there's no doubt when you're discussing comedy and Canada in the same sentence that we're responsible for some of the funniest people ever to be seen on television. Most of the cast of SCTV to begin with, and then, of course, people such as Jim Carrey and Michael J. Fox, to name but a few, and boy, there are many. But there are also a lot of really, really funny people behind the scenes that make these television shows as great as they are. One of those people is our guest today. He is Chuck Tatham. Now, that name might not mean much to you, but his credits certainly will. He was responsible in whole or in part as either a screenwriter and or producer of such great programs as Full House, Arrested Development, How I Met Your Mother, Modern Family, and most recently, Children Ruin Everything. Chuck, it's good to see you again. Last time we chatted, you had just released Offside, the Harold Ballard story, and I understand it did really well on TV. I know great reviews from everybody I know that saw it.
Well, thank you, Ted. It was very well received. We had no idea. We hoped and prayed. We had no idea that it would be so popular. The media blew up, and everybody has a Ballard story. People that were born after Ballard had a story. People who went through the 60s and 70s with Ballard had a story. It was very gratifying and a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
And we haven't been sued yet, which is fantastic.
Yes, that's always a good sign, isn't it? Let's go back here because I'm quite fascinated with your upbringing. You were born in Listowel, but really you call yourself is it a Guelphonian, a Guelphite? What are you?
I'm a Guelphite, born in Listowel, a couple of years in Waterloo, a couple of years in London. I guess my mom and dad were just trying to stay ahead of the law,
Yeah.
and then wound up in Guelph by grade 3.
Mm-hmm.
And high school in Guelph, Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo,
Mm-hmm.
and then off into advertising in Toronto, Chicago, and then ultimately LA.
Now, when you were a young kid, you like most Canadian kids, you were a hockey fan. You were a Leaf fan, right?
Habs.
You were a Habs fan.
I was a Habs fan because the Habs kept winning.
Yeah.
And my brother was a Habs fan, and he would say, why would anybody cheer for the Leafs? Look at the cups that Montreal's raking in. And as a little impressionable kid, in hindsight, I'm glad that I made that commitment. And in hindsight, I'm sad I committed to the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm glad I committed to the Canadiens.
I grew up as a Leaf fan. My brother was a Habs fan, which was always a lot of fun. And that was, of course, back in the original 6. I mean, and it was almost like every other Saturday, the two of them were playing against each other.
Yep.
And then, of course, the Leafs went on this, they went into the Ballard era, and the Habs just kept winning cups. And so we didn't talk for a lot of years, but we're okay now.
I understand completely.
So as a kid growing up, were you a big television fan? Did you ever have any aspirations or any indications at all that this is a career that might find compelling?
Interesting question. I know my mom and dad had tremendous senses of humor, and our default was to watch comedy. And as a little kid, I saw my mom and dad laugh uproariously at MASH. We watched MASH. We couldn't get enough MASH. My mom was an MD, and so she liked sort of the medical aspect of it, but it was so witty and there was so much wordplay and it was so smart and it had some emotion to it. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't know if I ever, Ted, I don't know if I ever said, I want to be in comedy. I want to be a writer. I want to go to Hollywood. I never said that, but I was aware of the rhythms and the systems and the structures of sitcom. And so I watched Happy Days, I watched MASH, I watched Cheers, I watched Frasier, and just getting in tune with those rhythms, getting in tune with characters' voices, which is very important. Every voice in a decent show is different. As they say, if you have a joke that any character can deliver, it's not a good joke, you know?
Right.
And so I got through high school and got into Laurier, and I wrote a column for the paper, a very sophisticated column called "What's Up, Chuck?" And that was a very sophomoric. That was sophomoric,
Ah,
literally and figuratively. But that gave me a little taste of, oh goodness gracious, it's good, it's fun to write stuff that people laugh at. And
as opposed to
then I
upchucking.
it was yes, there was definitely. I'm talking. I've looked at some of the old articles. My lord, that was not
Yeah.
good writing. Um, but and then Dad said, Dad was an old newspaper man. He said, learn how to write on a clock. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you can spend 5 years writing a novel no one will read. Bless your heart. Or you can work at a radio station or an ad agency or someplace like that, a newspaper where there's someone banging on your door every 45 seconds saying, where's the copy? Where's the script? Where's the copy? I
Yeah.
said, that's good training. He said, that's fantastic training for any writing job you'll ever have. And so
Yeah.
I went into advertising. Yeah.
True enough. So you spent what, 15 years in advertising?
Not quite that long. I got out of school in 85 and I moved to the States in 91. I did 6 years in
Mm-hmm.
Toronto at Saffer Advertising, and then I worked at Saffer's branch in Chicago. They were responsible for many things, Ted, including the brick commercials.
Right.
So anyone that knew me and knew that I did the brick commercials wanted to throttle me because they were so annoying.
Yeah.
And the home hardware commercials, which are lovely, that was fun. It was a retail shop, no packaged goods, and on a good week, I'd put in 75 hours and then collapse in a pile. It
Yeah.
was fairly labor intensive.
Yeah. And so the reason that you decided to leave advertising and take a shot, you and your brother moved to LA in like 91.
Yeah.
Was it because of the allure of writing for television, or was it that you just couldn't stand writing commercials anymore, or ad copy?
Probably both. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a fine I all hail and praise to anyone that does 40 years in an ad agency. Like all hail and praise. That's just that was not going to happen for me or my brother Jamie. I don't know if we said let's go to Hollywood and be content writers. We wanted to write comedy. If it was our essays, articles, jokes, sending stuff to Letterman, whatever, we just wanted to write comedy. And the show that we worked on a show, sold 2 scripts to Maniac Mansion in Toronto. Mike Short, Marty's brother, was the head
Sure.
writer.
Sure.
Eugene Levy was the director, and Mike Short said, "You guys," and bless him, he said, "You guys are good. There's no jobs here. You should go to LA." Really? Like, we like Toronto, we like New York. You got to go to LA. So there was never any great lust for Los Angeles, but that was absolutely where we had to go. When we got to LA, my brother and I both realized, yeah, this is where we had to go.
And you wrote an article, I think it was for, is it Playback Magazine, where you talk about becoming a scriptwriter and the difficulties in just trying to get a script to, like, first of all, if you don't have an agent, a producer is
Yeah.
not going to look at a script. And just the difficulty you talk about getting an agent, and literally hundreds of phone calls that you had to make just to get a script idea into the hands of an agent.
Yeah, it's a real, and many industries are not unlike this. Well, you don't get an agent unless you got a job. You don't get a job unless you got an agent. And so we
Yeah.
were, that was hundreds of phone calls, hundreds of cover letters. Our sample scripts were a Simpsons and a Frasier, as I recall. And to get those into the hands of somebody running a TV show, they absolutely had to come through an agent. So we finally got a guy, we tricked a very bright guy, an otherwise bright guy, into representing us, the late, great Stuart Jacobs. And Stu said, "I'll send your stuff out." And we were like, "Oh, thank God, we've fooled this man into wasting his time on our crappy fledgling." And he sent the stuff out across the board and got a hit at Full House. The showrunners at Full House wanted to meet us.
Right. Explain to people what, and because I want to get into some of this terminology with you, because for the average person, for the layman, it's confusing. A showrunner sounds like somebody who goes out and gets coffee for you. and
Yeah.
that's the
Well,
right,
you'd hope so. The showrunner is 9 times out of 10 the creator of the show, and
right,
they sort of sit at the head of the writers' table and adjudicate over what that goes in, and I don't like that, and that's a good joke, and let's do this story.
right.
And they're the gatekeeper for hiring and firing of writers, and they're what they say goes. So I think Jeff Franklin created Full House. By the time that my brother and I got there, the showrunners were Mark Warren and Dennis Rensler, two wonderful guys with the best New York accents. They're from the Brooklyn, from Canarsie and Sheepshead Bay, great accents. And in the job interview, of course, being Canadian, my brother and I asked if we could wear shorts, and they said yes. And we said, "Count us in." Yes, we don't want to wear pants anymore. So,
Yeah. Because yeah, as I look back at some of these older television shows that I watched, My Three Sons, and some of the old shows that are on now, you look at the list of credits. It looks like there's about 1/10 of the amount of credits that there are now in television shows. And back then, it seemed to me that there was one executive producer, and now there's
yes,
11.
there are.
What exactly is an executive producer, and what is the role of an executive producer, and why that
Okay,
many?
Ted, it's a great question. It only took me 20 years to figure it out. If you get hired on a show, they'll give you a title as a writer, as a story editor or a junior story editor or etc. As you ascend through the years, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, and then ultimately executive producer. It means it many times old writer, person who has been, person who has sort of slogged through the. Now, there's executive producers who write, and there are non-writing executive producers.
Hmm.
So you'll see on us on Seinfeld. I'm sure Larry David was an executive producer, and so was Jerry because they created the show. But
Right.
Shapiro and West are also executive producers because they're non-writing producers. And what do non-writing producers do? The business end of it. The business end of it. Michael Geddes was an executive producer on the Ballard documentary that we just did on CBC. Mike would tell you he's not a writer, but boy, did he put together the project. So that's what there are non-writing executive producers and there are writing executive producers.
Okay. And so it's for the average person to figure out who should I suck up to on this television show if I want to get on. Who do you aim at?
Well, you aim at the showrunner slash executive producer. Although the actors and the directors, it's funny because there's a difference between TV and film. Because in film, the director is king. The
Right.
director is very much king. In TV, there's that old joke about and it's a terrible old joke, but it's the woman that was wanted to get into movies, but she didn't know what she was doing, so she slept with the writer. I mean, but in TV, the writer drives the bus. The writer hires the director. The writer hires the cast, and so forth and so on.
Right.
And the spec scripts, the sample script that you have to send out to get it through, because there's a pile on the showrunner's desk of sample scripts that writers want you to read such that you'll hire them,
Mhm.
to get it into their hands and have them have first of all, a slot on staff, to have a piece of budget that can accommodate you, and to like your script is a kind of a big challenge.
Right. And you'll note that as television shows over the years, as they grow in popularity, and as the star becomes a bigger and a bigger star, eventually by the third, fourth season, that star quite often becomes the executive producer or an executive producer of the show
Very
as
much
well.
so. Very much so. And I think what happens there often is it's contractual. If the show runs 3 years, this actor will ascend to executive producer. And as a show goes on, a Kelsey Grammer will have more and more creative input,
Right.
and will have more input as to casting, as to writing, as to stories, and so forth and so on. But the confusing thing about producer is we think of somebody smoking cigars in an office, trying to cast a Broadway show or something. Producers do everything from the writing to the casting to the editing to the hiring to the firing. And if you are the showrunner and it's raining, that's your problem. We're shooting outside and it's raining. Everybody else on staff just goes get cookies and has orange juice.
Yeah.
The showrunner begins to take anxiety medication, and that's why they get the big money. So.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back here. Your first big gig with your brother is writing Full House. You did what 8 episodes of Full House?
We I think got written by credits for 8 episodes, but we worked 3 seasons, so that was about we were on board for about 72, I think, total episodes on staff, and
Hmm.
boy, was that a great experience. Our first taste at writing, one episode. All of the secondary characters we named after NHL officials. So I think there was a Koharski, there was a Van Hellemond, there was and nobody down there. They thought these were just random names. Oh no,
Yeah,
Art Scove. Art Scove's a good name for a
yeah.
character. And I think it's a story I've told a thousand times. And forgive my language, Ted and audience. Early on, I couldn't tell which one was Mary Kate and which one was Ashley because two little twins, identical, played Michelle.
Yeah.
And so I said to one of the older writers, "How can you tell which one is Mary Kate and which one is Ashley?" And he said, "Well, first you have to give a shit." And I thought,
Oh,
okay,
God, that's cruel.
okay.
That's funny, but it's cruel.
It's funny but cruel. Well,
Yeah.
that was the thing, though. That was the thing. Full House was the most wholesome, decent kids show ever, and that writers' room was just debased. There were writers that had been on Carson and Get Smart and Mel Brooks things, and so the room was very, very dirty, and the product was very wholesome and very,
Yeah.
very pure as the driven snow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there was a program that spawned a lot of different careers in different directions. You know
Oh
what I'm saying?
yes. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Bob, of course, went off to do America's Funniest Home Videos and be the narrator on How I Met Your Mother, a
Yeah,
show that I worked on years later. So I
right.
spent 3 years with Bob Saget on Full House, and I spent the last 5 years of Dear Departed Bob,
Yeah.
the last 5 years of How I Met Your Mother with Bob, and then John Stamos, of course, went off to do all manner of things. Dave
Hmm.
Coulier will forever be the funniest guy in the world. Roy Laughlin did a billion Hallmark movies, and then had a little
And
trouble.
and then did time.
She did a little bit. She did some Harold Ballard stuff.
Yeah.
She is a delight. She's a lovely, vivacious, talented woman, and I think maybe she got mixed up in something she wasn't interested in being mixed up in. But I'm glad that is water under the bridge, because I was always very fond of Lori, and she always treated us like kings. And
Hmm.
our kids all went to school together. So my sons, Trevor and Nick, went to school with Lori's kids in LA. And then, of course, Candace Cameron had a big career, and then the twins are fashionistas with their own line of clothing in New York, which is kind of cool.
And talk about the late Bob Saget. I think people would be shocked because the character they play. Because you're saying it's Full House was just such a wholesome family show. And
Yeah.
Bob Saget, as a stand-up comedian, was would
He was
would make a sailor blush. You
he
know?
really he would push. We would go do voiceover sessions for the narration of How I Met Your Mother. The first 20 minutes was always filthy, disgusting, crazy jokes, and Bob would just eventually, please, Bob, we've all got to go home for dinner. For the love of God, Bob. But he had a huge heart. I think part of it was a bit of a reaction. He made his name, to your point, as this clean-cut dad, but he was bristling the whole time to really be ribald and dirty. And so the minute he would get off the soundstage at Full House, he was he was really quite something.
How did Arrested? Chuck Tatham is with us right now. He is a television screenwriter, producer, executive producer, showrunner. Maybe he'll do whatever you want. Harold Ballard aficionado. How did Arrested Development come about for you?
Interesting story. Of course, when someone says interesting story, I always say, I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there's a funny story. I'm not sure. Let's all get you. I was working. I moved to Chicago to work on an ABC show called What About Joan, starring Joan Cusack. And the showrunner was a gentleman named John Levenstein, who's a delight. And when that show was canceled, we all moved back to LA. And John said, look up my friend Mitch Hurwitz. Mitch Hurwitz
Hmm.
was running a show at that time on CBS called The Ellen Show. Not Ellen, but The Ellen Show, the second iteration of Things for Ellen DeGeneres, with Martin Mull and Jim Gaffigan and Cloris Leachman, Emily Rutherford. Anyway, I looked up Mitch, and Mitch hired me, and I got to know Mitch. And ultimately, Mitch created Arrested Development and asked me to help on the pilot. He sent me the pilot script, Ted. Oh my Lord, I've never read anything funnier. It was absolutely breathtakingly funny.
Hmm.
And I remember saying to him, "I can maybe offer you a joke or two, but good Lord, have you written something bloody funny?" And but when I worked with him on the Ellen Show, we worked till 4 o'clock every morning, just without fail. Bless Mitch's heart, we worked till sunrise. And when Arrested started, my kids were 4 and 6 or 5 and 7 or something, and I wasn't ready to commit to a 75-hour week with Mitch. So seasons 1 and 2, I did not work on Arrested, but season 3, he convinced me to go over, and I worked on Arrested on the pilot and on season 3.
Hmm. And so following that, How I Met Your Mother came around.
Yeah, How I Met Your Arrested, How I Met Your Mother, and Modern Family were the 3 shows, 1, 2, 3, I worked on. They were all produced by 20th Century Fox.
Hmm.
And Carter Bays and Craig Thomas, the guys that created How I Met Your Mother, they met, I think, at Wesleyan in Connecticut, and then they went off to work for Letterman for 5.5 years, at which time they conceived How I Met Your Mother. They sold it to CBS, and they hired me when Arrested ended. I went on to How I Met Your Mother, I believe season 4, and then through to the end of the run. Season 4 or 5, I forget. Yeah.
Right. Now, being I want to ask you this because I want to talk about Modern Family because I think it's in the last 10 years it's got to be one of the top five of funniest television shows that I've
Thank
seen,
you.
and there's God knows there's a lot of really great television right now with the advent of streaming, etc.
Yes.
Uh, um, and because you're Canadian, and Canadians have a different style to their humor. Um, I believe anyway.
Yes, I agree.
When you're sitting in your writing, do you are you thinking to yourself, is this do I have to change this in any way so that it's more American sounding? I'm not talking about
I
using the word a or the Canadianisms, but
I I don't know about that. I do know that we have my theory is sort of that we like the substance of American comedy and we like the sensibility of British comedy.
right.
And so rather than sort of going straight at it, with all due respect to the United States of America, going sort of straight at it with a sledgehammer, there might be a little bit more sophistication. We're a little bit more satirical. We're a little bit more SCTV. And so if I'm writing on an American show, the key is to get the voice of the characters, whatever it is. Sofia Vergara on Modern Family, getting her voice. I never understood a syllable she said, actually, by the way. Supremely talented, really brilliant woman. But I need a translator, Sophia. I just don't know what's going on. But what I would submit, Ted, is it was more almost away from the writing where I was more Canadian, where I
Hmm.
might have been, I dare say, a little gentler, a little nicer, a little more passive, because the writer's room can be an extremely aggressive place. And I learned early on, I'm not aggressive enough. I don't think people might say, "Oh, you're plenty obnoxious. You're wonderfully obnoxious," to bulldoze through these writing sessions with other writers who are shouting and yelling and so forth. And so my tact naturally was to be a little gentler, a little quieter, and that might have been the only Canadian manifestation. But on Modern Family, because the show had so much heart, maybe that was, I mean, that was baked in, whether we think it was Canadian, American, or otherwise. Um, uh, every episode we tried to imbue with a certain amount of heart. And of course, How I Met Your Mother was lousy with Canadian jokes because of the Kobe Smulders character. So we were making up. I mean, and I didn't. Most of the Canadian jokes were written by other people. Like, are we allowed to say that Canadians are afraid of the dark? Sure, whatever. Canadians aren't going to mind. Um, but at the risk of backtracking and digressing, when I first went to Hollywood, Ted, people would say to me, "Go home," and I thought it was because they didn't like my writing, and it might have been. But I know in hindsight, to a certain extent, they would meet me and they'd think, you're just a nice guy. You're just a big happy guy,
Yeah,
and things won't end well."
yeah.
And I remember thinking, I bristled a little bit because I'm a little competitive and maybe a little tiny bit ambitious. I'm not going to go home. These are the only skills I have. If I go home, I'm a dead man. So I persevered despite my Canadian personality. But I don't think it really manifested much in the writing, except for actual, jokes about Katie Lang and Geddy Lee and you know Luke
But
Robitaille.
I recall in one episode of Modern Family, there's a reference where I think the line was something about you want more stop signs like in Canada.
Yes. Well, I'm not even sure if I was around for that episode, but Canadians, and we talked about this at work. First of all, I remember talking to a writer, and I said, "It's amazing how little the Americans know about Canada." And
Yeah.
he said, how much do you know about Finland?" I said, "What? How much do you know about Finland?" I said, "That's completely beside the point." He says, "It is not beside the point at all. We know
Well,
as
it
much
is.
about
Sure, it
you as you know
is.
about Finland." And there's well, and I said, "We're neighbors. We're trade." He
Yeah.
said, "We don't care. We don't know. We don't care. You've
Yeah.
heard of Helsinki. I've heard of Ottawa. That's it." And it's a very American. And of course, I know many Americans who love Canada, and are Stephen Lloyd is a wonderful writer I worked with on a couple of different shows, and he just loves Canada. I think in his heart he's Canadian. He's Chris Lloyd's brother, one of the co-creators of Modern Family, and so we worked
Mhm.
together on Modern Family together. But yeah, being Canadian, it's a card I can play. When I knew Martin Short was going to be on How I Met Your Mother, I knew he was going to be on the stage that day, so I wore a Hamilton Tiger Cats T-shirt, and
Yeah.
he pointed at me and he went, "You, where did you get that shirt?" And I said, "I'm from Guelph," and he came running over and dove into my arms. So I
Yeah.
said, yes, I'm from Guelph, and I actually played football at Ivor Wynne Stadium in Hamilton and so forth. So it's fun to be Canadian in LA.
More of the Ted Wallison podcast after this.
Hi, it's Ted Wallison for Tom's Place, where the month of February is all about hearts and family. Tom's late father, William Mahalik, was born on February 20th, 1916. He founded the original store back in 1958, believing in the importance of caring for your customers and always working hard to give the customer the best deal. These strong values carry on today at Tom's Place, and in honor of his father and the family business he created, Tom is celebrating with a Family Day sale. Selected 100% wool suits that retail for up to $5.99, now starting at just $179. Lips and dress shirts on final clearance. Winter coats 50% off, and beautiful cashmere sweaters regularly $500, now only $99. And they're available in men's and women's styles. It's all about family at Tom's Place. And at Tom's Place, everyone is treated like part of the family. The Tom's Place Family Day Sale, all month long in the heart of Kensington Market. Have you been tasked with the role of a state executor, or expected maybe in the future you will be? Well, if so, let me make your life a lot simpler by introducing you to my friend Debbie Stanley. Debbie is the founder of ETP Canada. They specialize in estate administration. Their goal simply is to help Canadian executors understand their role and how to deal with the loved one's estate. Let's face it, there's no school for this, but ETP Canada offers services such as executor support, estate accounting, and they have a new online course called Executor Ready. It's an engaging video designed to make estate administration easier and affordable. And those are two comforting thoughts during a stressful time. So call Debbie Stanley at 1-866 309-0387. That's 1-866-309-0387. Or you can get her at info@etpcanada.ca. That's info@etpcanada.ca.
Now back to Ted and his guest.
We have shipped so much great talent from this country to the United States, especially when you think of comedy and musicians, especially female
Oh,
singers. I mean, it's like if you took those away from the entertainment scene in the United States, TV would be only 18 hours a day.
it would not. You're absolutely right. The funny thing is, I ran into Donald Sutherland at the Emmys, and I said,
Hmm.
"Mr. Sutherland, it's nice to meet you." And he sort of gave me this weary yes, whatever. And I said, "Isn't it wild that Montreal doesn't have a baseball team anymore?" And he lit up. Warren Cromartie and Andre Dawson, and we found I ran into William Shatner at Disney Hall after, I think it was a Rachmaninoff concert or something, and we were waiting for our cars in the valet area, and we had a nice chat about Montreal. It's just the Canadian thing, just like that, and
Yeah.
it's great fun.
When you look at a show such as a Modern Family, typically there's three different stories going on in any given episode. So I'm assuming for any of those three different stories, I mean, it could be the family has one, and maybe Sophia's character has one, and there's got to be like three different teams of writing
Mhm.
three different stories.
No, it's the room is big enough that everybody sort of talks about the A story and then
Hmm.
sort of talks about the B story and the C story. Ideally, Ted, you have a theme. And if there are any young writers out there or old writers out there, if you can come up with a theme, say a theme, and at the risk of being simple, say a theme as simple as jealousy. Is there a story in A, B, and C? Is there a theme? Is there a thread of envy or jealousy that might be very well disguised in this story and very obvious in that story?
Right.
And where we can see that it is not so much three separate stories as a cohesive three very different stories on the face of it, but thematically they tend to feed on each other, and maybe by page 42 they come together, and that's the goal. And it's very hard to achieve. Ideally, because we're cranking out 22 episodes in 40 weeks, ideally we're just making funny cohesive episodes, but there are
Right.
occasions when we could have a theme run through them. But every episode on Modern Family, there were 22 episodes a year. 11 would be written in Steve Levitan's room and 11 would be written in Chris Lloyd's room, and without very much overlap. But if you were in Chris's room or Steve's room working on an episode, you did all three stories from top to bottom.
Right. And as the show progresses, as is typically, there are stars in the show who become bigger stars and
Yes.
characters have become more popular. Is there a tendency to want to lean more towards those and neglect the other stars, or do
Um,
you try to keep it as evenly balanced as possible? Fortunately, with Modern Family, I think everybody's equal on that show.
Everybody, we didn't, when there was a one part of the show was on, you would never long to go back to another part of the show. All the performances were always great. I think if a performer is great, you will not consciously say, "I'm going to give that actor more material," but you will unconsciously. You
Yeah.
will you will know that you can also give them the heavy lifting. This is a scene that requires bop, 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 bop. Give the heavy lifting to this actor or that actor. But when you think of it, the three biggest shows I've been on, Arrested, How I Met Your Mother, and Modern Family, there were no weak links. Well, we were very lucky that
Right.
you could ask anybody to work with anybody, and it worked out very well. But I've been in situations, and I might not discuss them in public, but there've been situations on other shows where there were performers. They're on. I can't whistle and I can't walk. Okay, fine. We won't make you whistle or walk. And and other performers. When you think of a guy like Ty Burrell, who played Phil Dunphy on Modern Family, from what I understand, Levitan and Lloyd had to fight extremely hard to get him on the show. ABC wasn't interested in Ty Burrell, from what I gather. He turned out to be the funniest man on planet Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just such a. So it's funny the way things work. He's also the nicest guy in the world. Despite being a Mets fan, he always has a fantastic attitude. So
A Mets fan.
he's a Mets
Well,
fan. God.
it takes balls to admit that. You gotta give him
Yeah,
credit for that.
it does. It
You,
does. It's easier to be a Mets fan in LA though, because people
yeah.
will see your Mets hat and go, "Ah, you poor bastard," So
Chuck Tatham is my guest. He's a television screenwriter, producer, executive producer. You talked at the outset of the interview. You had mentioned briefly MASH, which was one of the all-time great acted shows and all-time great written shows. I mean, the writing
mhm.
in it was so crisp. And the one thing about MASH that they managed to do was there were episodes where you'd be tuning in, and 1 minute you're holding your gut and you're laughing your ass off, and then a couple minutes later you're almost in tears. Did they manage to go from comedy to
Yeah.
pathos in
Oh,
so well? It's what some people call dramedies. I don't know, you hate that word.
yeah. Yes.
uh,
Yes.
is that got to be one of the most difficult things to do when you're writing a comedy, is to enter the world of drama?
It's incredibly hard, and to your point, I say a dramedy is neither,
Yeah.
but I do not. If I have the ability to write drama, Ted, I don't know if it's ever really manifested. I do not I do not have the talent of a Larry Gelbart. Larry Gelbart or a Neil Simon. Larry Gelbart was deeply involved in MASH. And we recall he wrote a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. He wrote Tootsie. I mean, to be able to be that funny. And there's that old story because he worked with Mel Brooks, and a reporter said to Mel Brooks and Larry Gelbart, "What's the difference between broad comedy and wit?" And Mel had a glass of water. And he said, "This is broad comedy," and he did this whole bit, and he wound up soaking wet. And the guy said to Larry Gelbart, "And what is wit?" And he looked at Mel and he said, "Wit is drier." So, and I
That's a
met
great line.
Larry Gelbart once, and I just about fell down. And I said, to your point, Ted, boy, to make people feel something real and make them laugh is something remarkable. And I've tried, and I think we did it on How I Met Your Mother. I think we did it on Modern Family.
Yeah.
Arrested Development, we had 4.5 million loyal fans. It didn't have a lot of heart. It was hilarious. Mitch Hurwitz is a genius. But that combination, I remember watching MASH going, wow, is that a tough needle to thread?
You were about to embark upon a project with Ron Howard called The Church of Reggie.
Yes.
Which was postponed because of the Screenwriters Guild went on strike at the time, I think, right?
It did. And that was an interesting project. I went to Ron because Imagine was the same production company for Arrested Development, and of course Ron was one of the principals, and he was the narrator of Arrested. And I went to him with the idea of a guy who comes up with his own religion almost accidentally, and gets some followers. Yeah. And he's as surprised as anybody that he's the figurehead for this. And I went to meet Ron Howard. They said, come to where he's shooting Frost Nixon. It was a soundstage down in Santa Monica. And when you get into the business, Ted, you realize always stand behind wherever you are. If you see cameras and lights, stand behind them. Stand behind them, no matter what's going on, because people will be lighting and moving things. So I got on the soundstage. I didn't know where Ron Howard was, but I saw some cameras and some lights. So I stood behind them, and I heard, "Excuse me," and I turned around, and there was a whole crew behind me. These were the fake lights and cameras for the Frost Nixon interviews in the movie.
Right.
So I was like,
right.
"Oh my God, I'm in the middle of a shot." So if you watch Frost Nixon carefully, you might see me. Anyway, I sat down with Ron, and we came up with this idea. I think it was 2007. That was many moons ago. And then the strike intervened, and that was a strike, as I recall, we wanted better residuals, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the last time I was on strike. I think it was 100 days, something like that. And
Wow.
then the next time we almost went on strike was to get streaming residuals because the studio said, the internet, nothing will come of the internet. You don't want money from the internet. Then it's nothing. Forget it. I can't believe you're lying awake at night worrying about the internet. And of course, thank God we did, because I think today the CBC president announced that the CBC will no longer be on TV in the coming years. It'll strictly be streaming. That's how prevalent the internet is. So
I could see that happening in a big time in the next 5-10 years from now. Huge. I mean, it's which is probably a good thing in the long run for a number of reasons. But why get into it? That's too much politics right now.
That's too much politics. But anyway, Church of Reggie went away. I don't remember exactly how or when it went away, but the process of writing a pilot of your own idea is a lot of fun. And then you sell it to a studio, and you just hope to gosh that they shoot it. And if they don't shoot it, you still get a check, which isn't so bad.
Yeah.
But I've talked to people who've had shows on TV, because I've never had a show on TV. And it's that bittersweet thing where they say your show is going to go on TV and your blood pressure immediately triples because of the pressure. And I don't need that, Ted. I like my blood pressure where it is. So.
Yeah, but did you ever think to yourself, well, let's give Church of Reggie a shot, or is that time come and gone?
That time has come and gone because I think Imagine owns it. Once you sell it, you would have to try and wrest it back from them.
Yeah, okay.
But I continue to write at pilots and sell pilots and hope. We Jim Parsons and I a couple of years ago did a pilot called Bless Her Heart, for CBS through Warner Brothers. And I thought, surely with Jim Parsons on board, I'll get this one on TV. But Jim who's brilliant, not only as a performer, but he's a great writer and a creative guy and a lovely person. Jim and I didn't get the ball across the goal line on that one. So I was like, oh my God, what are you going to do? It's a tricky business. There was that old saying, a network will buy 70 pilot scripts. They'll shoot 5. They'll put 1 on TV. I mean, the odds of you getting something on TV are extraordinarily small.
Yeah. So when you consider, some of the great actors over the years, who've been in 3 or 4 or 5 different sitcoms. Well, I mean, Kelsey Grammer is a perfect example. I mean, he was in like 2 hit shows, big hit shows, Cheers and Frasier. I mean, that's the odds of that happening in somebody's career are humongous. I mean, stacked against you, right?
Yeah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I think everything Julia Louis-Dreyfus has done has been great. They're just talented. Kelsey, I worked with him on a show called Back to You for Fox. And there's one night we were in front of an audience, 300 people, and he had a joke that didn't work. And I ran in and I gave Kelsey Grammer, I whispered to him a new joke. And he nodded in the action. And he did the scene and he did my joke. Dead silence. And he looked over in the wings. He looked and he said, Tatham! And I said, okay, if you're going to call me out. And I bowed for the audience and I got a nice round of applause. So.
Just as an aside here, since we're talking about Frasier, what's the latest you hear on that? Is there a reboot in the works?
There is a reboot, unless I'm very wrong. It's from my buddies Chris Harris and Joe Cristalli, and I worked with them on How I Met Your Mother. And I think it's going. I think it might be a scheduling thing. It's hard to get everybody in the same place at the right time. And remember, and I don't want to jinx anything, we might go on strike May 1st. The Writers Guild of America contract with the studios ends this May 1st. So there's a good chance you'll see me stocking shelves at Loblaws shortly. But Kelsey's on board. Chris Harris and Joe are supremely talented. They're great guys. I spent a lot of time with those guys on How I Met Your Mother, so I hope that goes.
But I understand that there's like very few, if anybody else is signed up for the deal. Any of the originals. David Hyde Price is not coming back.
No, it's funny. I've talked to people who were in films, and once they get into TV, they go, "This is the greatest job in the world." They, it's 22 episodes. I work maybe 3 days a week, maybe 5-6 hours a day. Why would I go back to film? However, if you do 8 or 10 or 12 years on a TV show, you often don't want to do that again. You don't want that rhythm. You don't want that. You want a new movie or a play. David Hyde Pierce is a great, legit performer in Broadway, et cetera. Right. So I understand how folks like that might not want to come back. I also understand the fact that even in the absence of John Mahoney and David Hyde Pierce, a guy of Kelsey's talent can make a show work.
Right.
If you're that good, then Kelsey will certainly be surrounded by great performers, but he's one of the best I've ever seen.
Chuck Tatham is my guest. He is a screenwriter, television screenwriter and producer. Your latest project called Children Ruin Everything. I watched it the other night on TV. It's shot here in Toronto, I believe, isn't it?
Interiors in Toronto, exteriors in the little town of Hamilton. And standing in for Roncesvalles, I think that's the Toronto neighborhood, I believe, that we're replicating.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, created by Kurt Smeaton from New Metric Media. The guy that runs New Metric is a wonderful guy, Mark Montefiore. I guess Kurt Smeaton's children ruin everything, Ted.
Yeah, I guess.
Because my kid said to me, I said, I had nothing to do with the title. I love you guys. You didn't ruin anything. My son. Yeah. But Kurt, he came off of Schitt's Creek. He's a guy out of Ottawa. Boy, I like Kurt. Boy, is he smart and funny. And the show is going into, it premiered last week on Roku in the States, season 2. And season 2 in Canada is chugging along on Monday nights on CTV right now. And season 3, I think we'll start shooting in the next few months. But it's my job there, Ted, so far has been to sit in LA in my underwear and read scripts and look at rough cuts of edits and send in notes. So it's it's been a lovely
It's a
time.
it's a very funny show. It's a very enjoyable show, and one of the things that makes it so enjoyable is the doses of reality that are in there. Real comedy works best when it's based on truth, or at least there's at least a sliver of truth in there where you can sit there and go, something like that happened to me, or I can understand,
Yeah.
or I can relate to that, or yeah, my nephew's like him, or my son's just like him. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? It's when you come up
Yeah.
with these
Yeah.
characters that are like cartoon characters where you think, well, that's super silly shit, right? But when you've got believable people, it works.
It does. It's the idea of being relatable has been around since the beginning of time. I do know Seinfeld was the exception to the rule. Seinfeld was the show that was so well done with terrible people that the entire comedy community said, I'm not sure I can relate to the things, I can relate to the situations, but not to the terrible behavior that it brings out in these four characters. Shows like Children Ruin Everything. In the episode that was actually on this week, there's a really nice montage, which is both real and funny and touching. And you don't know, I mean, the gang at Children Ruin Everything did a wonderful job on that. But Kurt is has great experience with the real of being a dad and the real of being a husband, and that's the because on Modern Family we would come in and say what happened on the weekend. Tell us what happened. All you guys, just everybody in the room, tell me something happened to me. I locked my kid in the car, but I was late for the Dodgers game, so I kind of left them there. Well, that sounds like a story, you know, real
well,
stuff that happens.
well, at least it was a Dodgers, not a Mets game.
Exactly.
You would have been doing the kid a favor if you left him in the car if it was a Mets
You
game.
leave them in the basket. Well, the other thing is to get to the real, to your point, to get to the relevant, you have to bare your soul. You'll be saying things, and I say this in all truth, you'll be saying things in the writer's room about your thoughts and feelings and things that have occurred to you that you haven't admitted to your spouse. You haven't admitted to your therapist.
Mm.
You'll be admitting not necessarily deep dark secrets, but the time you met Monty Hall, but you just shit your pants. You know, I mean, I'm not
That
going to
happened to you
suggest I
too?
should. Well, I'm not. I'm not going to suggest I shit my pants because I met Monty Hall. But if the two things were to happen at the same time, it's just a pure coincidence. Monty Hall, by the way, was the uncle of our neighbor across the street in Beverly Hills. And years ago, there was a party where I went over and I said, Mr. Hall, it's nice to meet you. I understand you're from Winnipeg. He said, yes. I said, I'm from Guelph. And we talked for 2 hours about Canada. So it was another one of those.
Yeah.
One of those Canada. He said, do you remember the big Kiwanis boys and girls dance in 1948 in Toronto? No,
Yeah,
Monty,
no.
I don't remember.
Yeah, not really.
You tell me about it. And he told me all about it. He was an effervescent, a lovely guy.
And that's another a name from the past that you bring up. And as we talked briefly about all the great talent that has been exported from Canada into the United States, and it goes back way, way, way back. It's like America's sweetheart. Oh God, what was her
Oh,
name?
um, uh, 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 Mary
Pickford,
Pickford and
Canadian.
Canadian, and the Pickford Arms or the Pickford Estate or whatever it is about 4 minutes from our house in L.A. She was a big deal, and Jack Warner, the guy that
Yeah,
founded Warner Brothers, London, Ontario. Canadians we've been weaseling our way into Hollywood for so darn long. I will say this, and I've said it before: if you are a writer or performer or director in Canada, don't hold up Hollywood as the promised land. It might be the promised land, but if you can do your work in Canada, do your work in Canada. I couldn't. My brother and I couldn't. We had to leave. There was no scripted comedy other than Maniac Mansion in Canada 30 years ago or whenever it was.
and then as you mentioned now, with so much coming out on streaming and so many different opportunities, that necessity of moving to Los Angeles has been diminished greatly.
I think it has been diminished. Everything has been diffused. Writing staffs used to be 19 people. Now, I don't know, 4. We used to do 24 episodes a season. Let's do 5.
Yeah.
And I had a meeting not long ago with Amazon where they said we don't want Canada to stand in for Chicago or New York anymore. It's Canada. Let's
Right.
embrace the fact it's Canada. And it's a nice feeling to think that the world wants to know Canada, see Canada, and so forth. There's one of the funniest movies of all time is called Tommy Boy with Chris Farley and Spade. And they talk about, we got to get to Chicago to see Zelensky, the Dan Aykroyd character. They cut to a Toronto streetcar on Queen Street or whatever, and they're not even, so at that time, Toronto stood in for Chicago. But I like the idea that Toronto is now Toronto. And now on Children of Everything, I will admit, we have Hamilton exteriors standing in for Toronto exteriors, but I think that was for financial and logistical reasons only.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's close enough.
It's close, yeah.
That's close enough unless you're a CFL fan. And now you're talking worlds apart. What?
Worlds apart, yeah.
Worlds apart. Chuck Tatham, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you again. And as I mentioned at the outset, the last time we chatted was just after the release of the documentary Offside, the Harold Ballard story, which you can still see on CBC Gem. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you do see it. And while you're at your television, make sure you tune in to see Children Ruin Everything as well. A real pleasure. We can do it again the next time another project rolls around, and I'm sure there's a lot of them rolling around in your head right now.
There are quite a few projects rolling around, Ted. It's a delight to talk to you. Assuming the immigration people don't find me, I am at your disposal whenever you need me.
Fair enough. I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Take care. Thank you, sir.
So once again, thanks for being with us. If it's your first time here, we appreciate it and hope you come back and hope you recommend our podcast to your friends. And don't forget, follow us. Also, don't forget, if you get a chance, go online, fill out your organ and tissue donation card. You could change or even save a life. Have a great week.
The Ted Wallacham Podcast has been brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And Helenda's, the meat people. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland locations. Helenda's, the way sausage should taste. The Ted Wallacham Podcast is produced by Joey Roselli. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. I'm Becky Coles. Submit your questions and comments to ted@twmedia.ca.